Always, always teach literature with books below reading level. And it doesn't matter how far below. The further below reading level, the better. And the reason for this is that one of the main obstacles we face in reading among reluctant readers is it's too hard.
Let's talk about how to encourage reluctant readers, because I have had a couple of those, of course, in my home. And by a couple, I mean two, and I only have two kids. So both of my girls, I think as many kids are in the beginning, are reluctant readers. I have one now who really does not like to read out loud. Like if I said, let's do a read aloud, she's like, no, anything. Can I do dishes? Can I scrub toilets? I will literally do anything else but have to read aloud. So I would love to talk about that. How can you encourage parents who have those kids who are just like, I don't want to learn to read, or I don't want to read aloud. What do we do with those ones?
That's a great question, because we all struggle with it to one degree or another. I had 6 kids, and they were not all equally enthusiastic about reading, either alone or aloud. And we had decided in our family that it was a priority. And it sounds like today we're talking with people who may have already assumed that that is a decent priority to have. Reading is good. Reading aloud is good. Kids should learn to do it, and maybe even be made to do it, since not every kid knows exactly what's good for him at all times. And so we're presented with a problem. And one of the things we've always done at CenterForLit, which goes along with our Socratic method and our use of children's stories to teach the basic elements of fiction to prepare kids to read adult classics when they grow up, is to focus on the use and the benefit that children's books can provide in another way. That is, as a easy access, an easy way into confidence in reading. And this is the principle that we've distilled, that I share with everyone that I talk to about this. Always, always teach literature with books below reading level. Always, always teach literature with books below reading level. And it doesn't matter how far below. The further below reading level, the better. And the reason for this is that one of the main obstacles we face in reading among reluctant readers is it's too hard. Yeah. It's daunting. It is intimidating for me to try and read that book. I'm not going to understand it. The words are going to be too big. I don't get it. It's too much work. There's too many words on the page, et cetera, and et cetera. If we can remove all of those obstacles and just present reading itself in a situation where success is almost assured, then a lot of those barriers are going to start to come down. In a previous episode, we talked about A Bargain for Francis. I actually use A Bargain for Francis, the picture book about the 2 badgers that can't get along, in classes of every age up to and including adults. And one thing that never sticks as an objection is the reading level of this book is too low.
Right.
That just nobody ever says that. Nobody ever says that A Bargain for Francis, because it's too easy, can't teach me anything. Nobody ever says at the end of a class on A Bargain for Francis, I didn't learn anything because the book was too easy. As a matter of fact, they very often say the opposite. Thank God this book was easy, because the job of learning how to read literature was clearer and easier for me, since I didn't have to struggle through difficult vocabulary and difficult emotional content or whatever. This is true for our kids too. They're actually involved in 2 separate tasks: learning how books are put together and how to read them well, and learning to navigate difficult vocabulary and tough emotional content. We should separate those tasks out, and we should teach them how to read with super easy books where they cannot fail. And we've taken a lot of reluctant readers into a reading life by saying, here's a lesson where you can't fail. It involves reading and you are going to win. And we do that by using easy books. Yeah. That's the first thing I would say. Do I have time to say another one?
Yeah, definitely. I just was going to comment on that. I think that's so important, because those kids, especially in those early years when they're first learning how to read, they're learning to just dissect the words. And that in itself is such an effort for them. It takes so much out of them. And so earlier, of course, in the week, we talked about asking questions and the importance of that's how we teach good literature, right? But we don't want to ask a 4-year-old who's just learning how to dissect a word, okay, now let's ask all the questions about the content of the story, and I want you to give me a narrative on it. Like, that's unfair, because then that kid is going to be completely overwhelmed, and they are not going to want to read anymore. And the other thing I've learned with my girls, especially with one of them who's my reluctant read aloud girl, is I will read to her. I'll take an easy book and I will read a chapter out loud to her with her. I'll just the two of us, I'll read it to her and then I'll say, okay, now I want you to read it back to me. Because now she's already heard it and she's more confident in her ability to read it. And I find that has been helpful with her as well.
Yeah, what you're essentially doing when you read it for her and then you have her read it after you, is you are making out of that text an easy book.
Right.
You're essentially creating a situation where it's easy. Right. And I think that's what we should go for. We should set our kids up for success at every turn.
Yeah.
The other thing we can do is we cannot be so high and mighty about the fact that we have to have the greatest books that have ever been written on the curriculum from beginning to end. And if what they really want to do is read the Hardy Boys, and that's a book that is exciting to them and they will read it because they're interested, even though it's kind of vacuous and schlocky. So every once in a while, what we do with our kids sometimes we say, okay, we're gonna do this together. You pick one, and then I'll pick one.
Yes.
We'll read the Hardy Boys first, Percy Jackson first, or whatever, and then we're going to read the Odyssey after that.
Yeah.
That actually works pretty well as well.
Yeah. Here, I have a really funny story about that. And I'm pretty sure I've probably told this on the podcast in the past, but our oldest daughter, when she was just learning how to read, she was in, I don't know, probably second grade, before she really was comfortable reading chapter books, second or third grade. She could read, but it just scared her and she didn't want to read these chapter books. And so my husband had worked on 2 of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies and she had watched them and they're so dumb. I mean, the movies I actually think they're pretty funny. But the books themselves are just really, really dumb. Like there's no redeeming value to them whatsoever. But she wanted to read the books because my husband had worked, her daddy had worked on the movies. And so I kept saying, no, that's twaddle. You can't read twaddle. We don't read twaddle in this house. Right. And so finally my husband said, you know what? She's asking to read a book. You keep telling her to read. She wants to read Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Just let her read them. And they actually have chapters, but a chapter in Diary of a Wimpy Kid is like, 3 or 4 pages. And there's like 2 sentences on each page. Well, she read her first one in like 2 or 3 days. And she was like, I just read a whole chapter book by myself. And she was so proud of herself.
Is it?
And that was what kind of launched her into reading. Cause it was like, she just needed that confidence to know that she could do it. And
exactly
then she was fine. And it was such a funny thing that I'm like, okay, you were right. I was wrong. I should have let her read it a year ago.
Absolutely right. And you're to be so concerned about high quality content can sometimes get in the way of what's the other task that we're involved in, which is to break down the barriers to sitting in front of a book and reading it.
Homeschool Insights is sponsored by CTC Math. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com and try it for free. For more great homeschool inspiration and resources, listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.